buttons to press now. Yeah. Okay, pjnet.tv. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. on the East Coast, and we are experiencing some climate change here at the Eagle's Nest broadcast studio. But we're going to hopefully get through this because we have our guests waiting in the green room. We've got people just crowding up, opening the doors in the chat room. And you're in for a good time of edification, learning, and we're going to have she's going to have some announcements that you're going to be thrilled to hear about. So, what we're going to do, we're going to count it down to Studio 13, starting now. Well, good evening. This is pjnet.tv, and it is not raining at the moment. The Eagle's Nest is a wonderful broadcast facility with a tin roof, and when it rains, I just have to turn my mic down. So if that happens, fortunately, we have a very capable speaker who joins us each month, and I believe that would be on the first Wednesday of each month. I'm looking at the calendar, folks. That's where I'm looking. And Stephanie Pavlantos is a member of the PJNet team and a family member as well. And she joins us from her home where it is not raining.
Great.
Stephanie, we don't have a guest following this program tonight. We usually do, so we have some extra time. And we may need it because you have 2 sermons to preach tonight, I'm told. Folks, Stephanie,
it's all in one.
Yeah, Stephanie is one of the. Every guest kind of has their own area of specialty, and I consider Stephanie the encyclopedia of all things Hebraic. Is that that's not a word, is it?
Hebraic is.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Well, see, I'll use that next time I play Scrabble. I can't spell it, but But I don't know what started your interest in all things Hebrew, but this has become something we've come to expect from you. And you've, in fact, behind me, you see you've actually written a book on a book on a book, folks. So this is a book on a book. This is going deep. Jewels of Hebrews, which is has been quite a success, and I'm so proud. We are all so proud of you. But tonight,
Thank you.
With the Easter season approaching, we have to understand the intricacies of Hebrew traditions and things like that. And Stephanie, explain to us the significance and how it relates to Easter, or if it does, or maybe it doesn't. The Passover lamb. I've never drawn any parallels between the two. Is there a correlation?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, Easter, it's actually more pagan than it is Christian. I mean, that's where it came from. Everything about the Passover meal and the Feast of Unleavened Bread is all about Yeshua. It's all about Jesus. So it points to the whole Holy Week. It's all consuming about him, and the more that we get into it and you start understanding it, your eyes are like, you just kind of sit there like, oh my goodness, I didn't know this, I didn't know that, I didn't know this, and it's a little mind blowing, really, when you see how much even the Passover meal, which we think is all, that's just all Jewish stuff, but no, you cannot separate Judaism in the sense that of where it began and how God intended it from Christianity. They're not two separate things. One came out of another because the people rejected what Jesus was bringing to them. So it wasn't intended to be two separate religions, as we might say. It was supposed to be the same. So just like it talks about in Scripture that we're grafted in. Well, we were literally grafted in.
Yes, in fact, in the book of Hebrews, it bothered me when I was a child, like in my teenage years, because the Bible kept referring to God's chosen people.
Right.
Well, as soon as I began to understand, well, I'm not Jewish, I thought, well, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not among God's chosen. And by the way, how can God play favorites like that? You know, it doesn't seem ethically
Mm-hmm.
on balance.
It's
But I read later as an adult in the book of Hebrews that God adopted us into the seed of Abraham.
right.
Adopted.
Right.
And that word means a lot to me because, one, I was adopted.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, we adopted our daughter.
Mm.
So I
Okay.
understand the
Yeah.
strength of the
Right.
bond in a personal
Mm-hmm.
way, more so than just the understanding of the word adopted in the legal process.
Right.
No, adopted means you are their parents. They are your child. It
Right.
is there is no distinguishable difference, folks.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get my
And in
cackles
Roman
up.
times, that's right. But in Roman times, if you adopted, there was no getting out of it. Like you could disown your own child, but you couldn't disown an adopted child.
You could actually disown a
Yeah.
child in that culture.
Yes, but you could not disown an adopted child
Wow.
because they were yours. You wanted them, you brought them into your family. It was a legal binding agreement, and that was done. There was no getting rid of that child. So yeah, so it was even more concrete than genetics, and even.
Okay.
But yeah, it's very interesting. But the book of Ephesians, when it's talking about us and you, I mean, and in the first chapter especially, and further on, he keeps saying that we were chosen, and he's talking about them as Jewish people. He's talking about the Jews and the Gentile, and he's describing the relationship between them and us, and how God made them and us one.
Hmm.
And that's what Ephesians is all about. And when you look at it with those eyes, Jewish eyes, so to speak, even though we're not, we can, as we learn, we can look at it through the Hebrew eyes and see amazing things in Scripture when you know what you're looking for, and and someone teaches you. That's where it comes down to, really. So,
All right.
and Passover is no different.
Well, let me start with something simple because this is
Okay.
I'm not fully up to speed in this Passover lamb thing that you're talking about. I am familiar
Okay.
with the Passover because one of the plagues that
Right.
God put over the Pharaoh and the land of Egypt was the death angel was going to take.
Mm-hmm.
Now, was it the youngest son or the firstborn son? Which was
Firstborn.
Firstborn son.
Mm-hmm.
But the Jewish people were kind of given this secret message that if they would paint some blood over the door frame, so to speak, the threshold of the door, that the Passover angel of death would recognize that the angel would pass over that house.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Now, so
That's
was the blood used from a sacrificial lamb? Was that an institutionalized practice?
At the day of Moses, at that day. So they didn't need to do it throughout history, obviously, but for that day, for that angel and that last plague, not. So like in those, if I back up a little bit, so some of those plagues, if you remember, most of the plagues didn't affect the people, the Jewish people and where they lived. It only affected Egypt because each plague had to do with a god that the Egyptians worshipped. So get this. This isn't taught very often, but I learned from a Jewish site, basically, that the Egyptians had a deity that was a lamb.
Oh yeah.
So guess what? In saving the oldest child, they sacrificed the lamb. They used its blood to put on the door frames of their home, and then they cooked it and ate it. They couldn't leave any of it. But here you have them taking this lamb into their homes, and they're right there by their Egyptian neighbors who worship this lamb, and they take it in and then they slaughter it. And you can imagine that those Egyptians were just like, what have they done? Don't they know that we worship That's one of our gods. And so that's also, a slap in their face, but also a slap down from God saying, no, it's my lamb to use, and I'm going to use it the way I want. And that's how he did. He used it for redemption, for their redemption on that night, and for our redemption for eternity.
One of these days, we're going to have Bible Jeopardy. I'm going to build a studio, and we have got such a rich body of knowledge and wisdom here on pjnet.tv and elsewhere, of course. But so the slaughter of the lamb, well, the Passover came first. There couldn't have been a feast of the Passover before the Passover. So the Passover.
Right, the Passover.
Okay, all right. So then the tradition, I guess, caught on that
it was commanded.
It's commanded, and thus caught on that they are to commemorate this event. It is very significant, not only in terms of the plot of the story to get them to get Pharaoh to release them, but the fact that there was the shedding of blood, the innocence of a lamb. I have never seen a baby lamb, but I've seen pictures of them, but boy, they are cute.
Yeah, they are. And they're born with, they're not all white, let's put it that way. I mean, not every sheep is white, but the baby ones that are born just white, they have little pink hooves and everything. And their hooves are made as they're going through the birth canal. They're very, very soft so that they don't hurt the mother and injure her. So they come out and they just look like these little tiny pink shoes, and they're just so sweet and lovable. And you can't even imagine, slaughtering one and draining its blood. And but that was part of it. So what they did when they brought in the lamb, because they had to bring in the lamb 5 days or 4 days actually before Passover. So that lamb lived with them. It slept with them. They fed it. It was with them. Well, why would God have them do that and then slaughter? So they could bond with it and they could understand the pain,
the grief,
of slaughtering something that they had spent those days
grown to love. Yeah.
Yes. And it's just like the pain that he went through in giving up his son. And there's so many parts of the story that are just so amazing. But as you go through the timeline, when Jesus came into Jerusalem on what we call Palm Sunday.
Friday.
Palm Sunday.
Oh, that's right.
Palm Sunday, right?
Yeah.
It's
Good Friday. Yeah.
Good Friday.
Okay.
So we get our end of the week. So we're at the other end of the week. And so so he comes in. And so at this time that he's writing in, it was normal, like they would bring in a king over palm branches, okay? And they would lay down their coats and everything. Well, guess what? When they took a lamb into the temple to be slaughtered for a sacrifice for sin, they laid down palm branches. And the sheep went over the palm branches.
No
into
way.
The temple.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so.
And they had no idea at the time they were doing that.
Right. But God worked it all out. He wanted every single thing to point to his son, so that they would put it all together. And the wise people did. They put it all together, and they understood what was going on. But so here comes Jesus into Jerusalem on the palm branches to shouts of, Hosanna and hallelujah and all these things. And well, at the same time, they're taking in that little lamb into their homes. So these things happened on the same day. So he comes into his home, so to speak, Jerusalem, and the lamb goes into the home of the family that's going to have that, okay? So these 4 days that they have this lamb, They're feeding it, they're taking care of it, but they're also, the Bible calls it that they're testing it. And what that really means is that they're watching to make sure there's no blemishes. They're inspecting it to make sure it's perfect. Well, what happens while Jesus is those 4 days before Passover, he's being tested. He's being tested by scribes, by rabbis. He's being questioned. His authority is being questioned. And it's a testing. So he's undergoing this scrutiny. Are you who you say you are? Are you perfect? How can you be this lamb? How can you be this perfect human? Because you're saying you're God. That means you're saying you're perfect. So we've got to test you, and we've got to figure out where there's holes in your story. So they're testing them. And so then what happens? Okay, so part of the feast is it's called the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So they go through their houses and they get rid of yeast. That's what the leaven, and it represented sin. But at the time, during the days of Moses, when they left Egypt, they could only take unleavened bread with them. I'm sorry if I said leaven, but unleavened bread with them. So they carried the unleavened bread dough and their bowls on their shoulders as they left Egypt. And that's what they ate, because for 7 days they traveled to get to the Red Sea. So that feast is basically the time that they left Egypt till they got to the Red Sea and crossed over it. And so during that time, they're eating that leavened bread. So they're recreating that in this feast. They're recreating that time. So what happens? They're cleaning out in the modern day, they're cleaning out their homes, getting rid of everything that has yeast in it. Jesus goes in to his house and he cleans it He gets a whip, cleans out those people, what do they call them? I've just left me, but the money changers and all of that. So he's cleaning the leaven out of his temple, out of his home.
And my understanding was that the money changers were one thing, but apparently quite an enterprise got invented around selling animals for the sacrifice. And the church had become, or the synagogue had become more a place of commerce than a place of worship. And it was a defilement.
Right. And they were set up in the court of the Gentile, which meant that they were taking up the whole courts where the Gentiles could come into the temple and learn and be taught what was going on in the Passover. But they're taking up that space, so now there's no place for the Gentiles to go. So along with the money changers and the business they made, he's also, no, this is for Gentiles, get out of here, so he's getting rid of the leaven. And so you see these things, they coincide with what happened with the lamb, okay? So then you have, in the timeline, so I'm going to just read this. I opened it up. But so we know that Jesus had a Last Supper with his disciples, right? Well, it's what we would call Seder meal. It's the Passover meal.
Right.
He didn't have the Passover meal at the same time as all the other Jews. So we see in Luke 22, then came the day of unleavened bread, on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. So Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, "Go prepare the Passover for us, that we may eat it." They said to him, where would you have us prepare it? And he said, "Behold, when you have entered the city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him." And basically tell him that the master requires a room. Well, what's the significance? Why is that in the story? A man who carried water would mean that he was an unmarried man. But even more importantly, he was an Essene. Okay? He was from a sect of Judaism which celebrated the Passover a day before the other Orthodox Jews. And this is the Essene, were the people who were responsible for the Dead Sea Scrolls. But they were very strict. They were even more strict than the Orthodox Jews. So, but that's why they had that's what made them stand out, is that they had taken a vow to be, what's the word, chaste or unmarried for the rest of their lives. And so they would carry their own water. So here he is asking them, give us a room so we can share the Passover. And we're going to do it the same day you're going to do it, which would have been, okay, so I'm going to give you some dates here. So the 10th of the month, Jesus came into Jerusalem. On the 13th of the month, which would have been the day before the Passover meal, in the evening, so at the bottom, like around 5:30, 6 o'clock, they would have had their Passover meal. He would have had the Passover meal with the disciples.
That would have been Wednesday.
Yes. So we're at Wednesday evening, because on Thursday afternoon was the day of preparation. There were 2 days of preparation. There was one day before Passover meal, and there was one day before the actual Shabbat or the Sabbath. So only when you had a major feast did you have 2 Sabbaths. So there were 7 extra Sabbaths or Shabbat, because there was one for each feast. So that's where we get tripped up, because we'll see the Sabbath was coming and this had to be done and this had to be done. He couldn't be on the cross. They weren't talking about Shabbat as in Friday night to Saturday night. They were talking about the one before Passover, which would be Thursday night to Friday night.
Which makes 3 days later.
Yes. 3 days, 3 nights, he was in the ground, like he said. He didn't lie. He didn't make it up. We don't have to rearrange the schedule to figure it out. He said it, and it was true. So in some of it, there's like, let me just read this one to you, because this should be a clue to us all. So Jesus is arrested, and we know he's taken to the governor. He's taken to Pilate. So it says that his guards led Jesus from the house of Cephas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. So it's early morning on Thursday. He'd already, because he was arrested that evening before, after their Passover. Mm-hmm. Right. So they themselves did not enter the governor's quarters so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. Well, Jesus already ate the Passover. So why are they eating it now? That's because they're eating it when they were supposed to. Exactly, when they were supposed to eat it. So they eat it on Thursday at sundown, which is the 14th at sundown. Now, this is the thing about their schedule, their calendar. Our dates change at the top of the, like at midnight. Theirs did too.
Huh?
But that time from 6 to midnight, 6 in the evening till midnight, was already the next day. So they already counted it the next day, but then the actual date changed at midnight. So they would start calling the night of the 13th, the Bible would start calling it the day before Passover, okay? Because Passover started 24 hours later. So Passover would start on Thursday evening at 5:30, 6 o'clock. So Jesus had to be in the tomb before Passover, because that would be a defilement to be taking them off the cross and dealing with all of that.
I have heard that it was customary when during a crucifixion, that if the person weren't dead and it was approaching whatever the day,
Shabbat.
Yeah, that's why they would then break the legs, the shins of the person on the
Because they wouldn't be able
cross,
to breathe.
so that they would not be able to push themselves up to breathe, and that would expedite their death. In fact, it was rather, I know it sounds gruesome, but in fact that would have been merciful, but it was based on
Right.
a Jewish tradition that the Romans
Right.
were deferent to.
Right, because some of the men and I guess women might be crucified, but they could hang there for days before they died.
Right.
And so it was merciful, but yet it was, it's still cruel.
But Jesus was an exception because no bone was broken.
That's right.
And by tradition, they should have been.
So let me read something else here to you, because that goes along with this. So we've all heard that Jesus hung on the cross, and while he's on the cross, what did God do? What have you been taught? What did God do?
In what context?
It says that he basically, we are told that he turned his back, right?
Well, yeah, there was
because
that. That's why Jesus said, "Why have you forsaken me?"
Now let me give you a different spin on that. Psalm 22, the very first verse says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Jesus quotes that from the cross. Well, Jesus was a very good rabbi, and from the cross, he was still teaching his disciples. So what a rabbi would do is they would quote the first, what we would call first verse of a particular book, and their disciples, because every rabbi started his ministry at 30 years old. Every rabbi had disciples, and every rabbi traveled from town to town. Jesus was no different in that way. He was a very, very good Jew. You have to understand that. So, which we kind of forget his Jewishness. But he did the same thing, even from the cross. He quotes Psalm 22:1. But look at the verses that are in 22:1. I'm despised by the people. All who see me mock me. We can go into John and Luke and see that he was mocked and he was despised. I was poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart was like wax. It's melted within me. My tongue sticks to my jaws. Okay? You pierced my hands and my feet. This is all in Psalm 22. So what are his disciples doing? They're quoting this because he gave them the first verse. They start quoting it. They start thinking about it, and they see this play out before their very eyes. They divide my garments among them, and my clothing they cast lots. They count on my bones like they were getting ready to break them. And so they see that this Psalm 22 is all about the Messiah and what the Messiah was going to go through. So what he's saying from the cross, you're seeing me. You're seeing the Messiah that's spoken of in Psalm 22. You're seeing those things happen right now in front of you. So it's not that God turned his back or forsook him. He used it as a teaching, as a lesson, so that they knew he was the Messiah. And it's mind-blowing when you understand those things and those customs and why a rabbi did what he did, and in turn why Jesus did what he did, because he was a rabbi and he knew how to teach his disciples. And so he's put into the grave on the preparation day, which is the hours before the Passover, which would be Thursday afternoon. But okay, so here's what happened. So Jesus is hanging on the cross. Everyone's bringing their lambs to the priests, to the Levites, to slaughter for their Passover meal. The lambs, once they're slaughtered, they're hung up on a wire with their front legs up and stretched out so they can be skinned. So they're in this position, being hung from a wire to be skinned. At the same time, Jesus is over there hanging on the cross, And then he says, it is finished. The priests, when they're all done, they yell, it's finished. No more sacrifices, no more lambs, we're done. Okay, so this is all happening because the sacrifice started at 3:00 in the afternoon, which is when he was crucified, and it went until right before, I think he was taken off the cross before 6 o'clock.
Yeah, before sundown.
Sundown. Yeah. So they stopped before sundown, and they were done. So they're at the same time. It was just everything lined up to the minute, or let's say the exact hour, that what was going on in the temple was going on the cross.
On Calvary, yeah. Amazing.
So then, of course, it wasn't lost on the priest. I remember one of the very first times I was taught by a rabbi, a Messianic rabbi. When he shared that, he goes, here's these priests yelling, it is finished. And they hear Jesus, the Lamb of God, yelling, it is finished. And they understood. That's why Luke wrote his gospel, because the high priest said, why are my priests following this man? And who is this man? Why did Judas have to kiss Jesus when he turned him into the high priest and the guards? People didn't know who he was. They didn't recognize his face. It's not like social media. Everybody knew who he was when he passed. He kissed him so they would know which man was Jesus, which man was causing all this trouble. And so it's all these little things, all these little clues that were given in Scripture, when you start putting them together and you see this picture, you see this puzzle and the pieces coming together of why people, in a sense, did their part. They played out their part that God had ordained.
This had all been orchestrated.
Yes.
And choreographed.
So what happened? Right. So what happens? Now Jesus is put into the tomb. Mary goes to the tomb, and we see, I believe it's in Luke, but I could be wrong. But she goes to the tomb, and she sees that he's not there. So who does she see? She sees two angels. So she peeks in, and she sees two angels. The angels are sitting where Jesus' body had laid. Mm-hmm. Now, go way back to Moses. God gives Moses a picture, and he says, this is what I want you to build. The mercy seat, where this will be sacrificed, where the sacrifice will be killed and given to me. It will have two angels with their facing each other, with their wings touching. There's going to be blood there from the sacrifice. So here's Mary. She comes in and she sees the same scene in the tomb. The two angels sitting where his head and his feet had been, probably facing each other with their wings touching, and blood where his body had been.
You're giving me chill bumps.
But this is how it all played out. He didn't waste anything. He looks into the future and he says, that's what my son, this is what it's going to look like. So Moses, I'm giving you a glimpse of the future. Build it. Wow. Build it. Make it look just like that. When they see this mercy seat, somebody's going to see that, and they're going to know.
I'm glad we had extra time tonight, because there's just no end to the interesting detail of the choreography, the imagery.
But that's what makes the Bible his living word. It's like, I get excited about it because it is exciting to me to see these things fall into place and come together like this. No man could have orchestrated that.
Well, and
these
they didn't have
words.
This would be hard to pull off today with our communication and all that. But back then, it is utterly unthinkable that this can be attributed to coincidence.
Right.
The possibility is, that would be on another planet. It doesn't exist. Stephanie, you have, thank you for, there is so much, I
get all excited, my heart starts beating fast, and that's what affects me.
folks, Stephanie is, well, just thank you. I don't know what else to say. But you've got some great news. You have two announcements to make.
So, one is that I am going to the Florida Christian Writers Conference in October, and Eva Marie Everson asked me to be their official photographer. So I get to go with my handy dandy little camera and take pictures throughout the conference. And so I'm just thrilled because I think to me, that was just so exciting to be able to do that. And so I'll be in everybody's picture, or I'll be in everybody's face that's taking pictures.
You won't be in anybody's picture.
So I've already been thinking, okay, I'm going to stage this, I'm going to stage that. I already have all these ideas of what I want to do and what I want to put together. So, and then the second little piece of news is thanks to a very dear friend, Annette Griffin, I was asked to join the team of the Crosswalk and Bible study tools to write for Salem Media. So I get to start posting or sending in my stories. And actually, the story I just told, they needed, I guess BibleStudyTools.com is a little bit more in depth. They want deeper stories and more background and meaning. And she recommended me because they wanted a story on the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. So, so I get to go as deep as I want, and I get like 1,200 to 2,000 words. And so I finished my story, and I'm going to get it turned in.
Well, I'm going to count the words from our program tonight and see how you did.
Oh, I went way over. I was actually writing type today. I was going through and editing and getting out some of the stuff that I didn't need. But I still have it to like 1,800 words. So I did really well.
Yeah. Well, Stephanie, with regard to the Florida Christian Writer Conference, that is an iconic event for so many people that are in the Christian writing industry, so to speak. And it certainly is an honor. I mean, I was excited. Yeah, and well, and it's funny because you get all this gear. It was kind of a hobby, and it just got better and better and better, and now it's rewarding you, and it's such an honor, and to have it's great to have somebody like yourself doing it that's a believer. And, because you can hire that stuff out, but then what do you get? So that's wonderful. And what an opportunity. Well, I'm glad to hear you got a day job because, you didn't have anything to do.
I did.
In fact, you're going to be kind of busy next week, aren't you?
We are. Yes, because I'm going to be because I'm going to travel down to North Carolina and see my friend Star. And we are going to hopefully finish up all the stuff that we need to do for our book, Room at the Table, Stories of Encouragement from Special Needs Families. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to the nice weather and hopefully.
The tornadoes.
She sent me, not the tornadoes. We can get those up here. We don't need to go down there. So thank you. I'll just leave them here.
I was talking to someone about that book earlier this week, or the book being written, and I said, I forget who it was, but I said that that's probably going to come out this year. Did I speak truthfully?
I'm hoping. Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, said probably. I didn't say it would.
Right. Yeah, but it could. So. But we've got a lot done, and we had some really wonderful writers, and man, I mean, some of those stories, I'm sitting there having to wipe my eyes and get tissues, blow my nose. I mean, some incredible stories, and I'm so excited to let other people read them and get the opportunity to share those stories, and I think it's really going to touch lives. So
I can't think of anybody better than you and Star to spearhead. And what excites me is not how much encouragement it will be to special needs moms and parents in general, but for the rest of us, we need help understanding
Right.
how to minister to you
Absolutely.
and how to
Hmm.
accept you with your quote baggage.
Right.
And unfortunately, the way we're coping with it is we tend to avoid social situations with parents of special
Exactly.
needs children, and
Hmm.
that's not what God
Hmm.
called us to.
Right.
Uh,
There's a lighthearted portion at the back at the end of the book, and it's if special needs children ruled the world, or even people, special needs people, and we having each contributor add something, their little line of what it
oh
would
yeah,
be, and it's like the thing that I'm going to add is everyone would be invited to a birthday party. Everyone.
everyone.
There would be no uninvited or not good enough people to go to a birthday party. You just don't realize how these kids are left out of social things
It
and
it's heartbreaking to even contemplate it,
mhm,
let alone to live through it, as
yes,
you and Star have, and
right.
continue. Wow. All right. Well, Stephanie, you have really blessed us tonight. I'm so glad we did have extra
Thank
time.
you.
And
I am
boy,
too.
gosh, I can't keep up with everything. But thanks for sharing. And in both the
Thank
case
you.
of your writing for Crosswalk, what's the name of the ministry? It's Crosswalk. Dot.
Yes, crosswalk.com. And
Okay.
then it's
But
also
the parent company is
the is Salem Media is
Salem
the
Media.
parent company.
Okay. All right. Well, they picked the right
So
person for that, and they picked the right person to be the official photographer for the Florida
yes,
Christian
thank you.
Writers Conference. So
Hmm.
wonderful, and come down here to
Exciting.
Florida, bring all your money, and spend it all before you leave, if you don't mind. We're counting on you.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for sharing.
Mark.
All right, Stephanie Pavlantos. Here on pjnet.tv, author of the book behind me, Jewels of Hebrews. And that's going to wrap it up for us tonight here at PJNet. I told you we have an announcement we've been teasing. The official launch date is April the 12th, and we're going to make it. And we're going to make it because I was up all night the past 2 nights. I'll be up all night tonight working on it. And we're really excited about presenting not only our pjnet.tv programming, but also short stories written exclusively by Christian authors. We will be presenting them not in just a podcast format, but as actual theatrical productions where the actual persons, the characters in the stories, are individuals who speak the individual parts. Hadn't seen that anywhere. It's going to be great. Anyway, we're looking forward to it. It's happening. And by the way, as it so happens, coincidentally, I'm sure, on the 13th, Star Ayers, who was the progenitor of this whole idea. Her first short story is the launch short story that we're going to use. She will be on our program the next night, Wednesday night. So we're launching on Tuesday. She'll be here on Wednesday night next week. So that wraps it up for us tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night, and go to pjnet.tv and hit the schedule button, and you will see the rich list of guests. I lost count, or haven't counted lately. I haven't lost count, but we were like at 257 first-time guests. Now we've had more programs than that, but we have regular guests who come back and recurring. But imagine that 257 different people have shared their walk with Christ on our program. And God is that's, to me, folks, this is amazing. Let me tell you why. Folks, I'm old. Okay? I don't have, if we did this once a week or once a month, do you know how long it would take to have 257 people tell their story? I don't have that kind of time. Okay? So we have an urgent need to share the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, and that's what we do here. Everyday Christians just simply sharing their walk with Christ. So, here's a challenge for you. having to do with sharing the gospel. Okay. It's 2 questions. Here we go. Ready? First question. What is the boldest thing that you've ever done for Jesus Christ? And the second question is, how long ago was that? The challenge is to never be satisfied with either answer.